Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I am Councillor Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I'd just like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. If you could please switch off or make silent your mobile phones. Keep your microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. And when invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. Before we move on to business, we are deeply saddened at the passing of the Chair of the Council, Councillor Beattie Bainbridge. Beattie was such a warm and caring lady and will be truly missed by all who knew her. Our sincerest condolences go out to her family, friends and loved ones, and will now have a moment's reflection as a mark of respect. Okay, thank you. So moving on to the agenda, I've agreed to amend the order of business on today's agenda and we will consider item 6, providing a sustainable solution for Wellfield School after declarations of interest. So item 1, public questions. We haven't received any public questions for today's meeting. Item 2, the minutes. Can I have a mover and seconder to the minutes of the meeting on the 8th of February, please?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you. Can we agree the minutes are a correct record? Okay, I can therefore confirm that the minutes are agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members this morning, please? No? Okay, so we'll move straight to item 6, which is providing a sustainable solution for Wellfield School, a joint report of Corporate Director of Children and Young People Services and the Corporate Director of Resources. Can I please ask Jim Murray, Head of Education and Skills, to present the report?
Thanks, Chair, and morning, everyone. This report describes the current position of Wellfield School and details the progress made since 2016 to address the school's significant deficit budget. Wellfield School is an 11 to 16 community school with a capacity for 1,154 pupils, situated in Wingate, serving mainly deprived local wards and communities. The school has now had good outcomes for overall effectiveness in its last 2 inspections and achieves consistently strong attainment and progress outcomes. This was not always the case, and sadly, the school had struggled significantly between 2005 and 2012, when an inadequate judgment criticised all aspects of its provision. Its local catchment community quickly lost faith in the school and first choice applications significantly declined. Rising standards and Ofsted recognition as a good school, initially in 2014, came on the back of a successful headship appointment and leadership impact within the school. Despite this extremely successful period and turnaround, the school had accrued a substantial cumulative deficit. The smaller year groups that were a consequence of the inadequate inspection still had several years to work through the system. The Cabinet had previously agreed in 2018 to write off this deficit on the school's potential academisation in partnership with Tanfield School. This was not supported by the DFE and the Regional Schools Commissioner at the time. Tanfield were instead presented with a different solution and later joined Eden Learning Trust. Since then, the school has continued to prosper and admission numbers have been excellent and oversubscribed for subsequent year groups. DCC have worked effectively with the school and a deficit repayment scheme has been met over the last 3 years with a 600,000 reduction in the deficit at its peak. The current in-year financial position is now very healthy. Governors have expressed concerns over a number of years about the funding for current cohorts of children being used to pay the historic deficit situation. As a consequence of this, they have continued to look to academise the school with a strong multi-academy trust. New College Durham Academies Trust is a MAT which has worked with the school and has gained the trust and support of the governing body in pursuing this conversion. It has academies in Consett and Stanley and wishes to expand within Durham and its neighbouring schools. Confirmation of the DFE and Regional Schools Commissioner approval has been sought in advance of this request and was accepted by the Head Teacher Board on the 19th of January 2023. An Academy order has now been issued. The recommendation, provided in paragraph 12 of the report, asks that Cabinet agree to writing off the accumulated deficit of Wellfield Community School at the point of Academy conversion with New College Durham Academy Trust. The sum to be written off will be funded from the earmark reserve previously established to meet such costs. This would allow academisation to take place on its planned conversion date of June the 1st, 2023. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. Can I invite Councillor Ted Henderson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People's Services, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. The plans set out within the report will ensure the secure future for the Wellfield School. By joining an established multi-academy trust, the Council will enable this to happen by writing off the school's historic deficit. This will ensure we can meet our duties to provide sufficient high-quality school places for children living in and around the area. The Council has a strong and effective working relationship with the proposed Academy Trust and has worked successfully with the organisation and its schools in Consett and North Durham. The Department for Education is supportive of the proposals, identifying the need to develop and expand successful multi-academy trusts. This will deliver a financial viable solution for the school's future, allowing all of its pupils' funding to be channeled into sustaining and improving the educational standards. For these reasons, I would like to propose that the Cabinet support the recommendation to write off the accumulated deficit of Wellfield School at the point of conversion. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ted. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. The Wellfield deficit started over 10 years ago when falling standards made it unpopular with parents and pupils and led to an unsuccessful attempt to find an academy sponsor to take it on, which was a Department for Education requirement at that time. It was agreed by Cabinet on the 14th of November 2018 to write this deficit off if the school joined a multi-academy trust. While this did not proceed at the time, the school has worked hard to further improve standards of learning, and the school has become now more popular and able to balance its in-year budget for several years now. During this time, it has also repaid some of this deficit as part of an agreed annual recovery plan, but the school is challenged by the legacy deficit that was created 10 years ago and would take many years for this to be eradicated. The recommendations in this report will allow the current school population to access the full allocation of funding that they have been given to support their curriculum and learning. It also de-risks the Council from any financial challenges the school might face in the future should standards become an issue again. The write-off of this deficit will be met from the earmarked reserve set aside for the purpose and is consistent with both the previous Cabinet decision and the action taken on other problematic schools in recent years, and provides a great opportunity for the school to continue to thrive and improve as part of the New College Durham Academy Trust. For these reasons, I'm happy to support my colleague and second the proposal.
Thanks, Richard. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Yeah, Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is not the first time since we took over from the previous Labour administration that we've had to deal with difficult school issues that Labour failed to lead on. All right, we all recognise and expect the government to provide sufficient funding to schools. But there's also an obligation on all schools, governing bodies and local authorities to ensure that schools' budgets are managed within the finances available and, critically, that education is to the highest standards possible. It's deeply concerning to me that the issues with Wellfield were not addressed by the previous administration sooner, both in terms of standards and finances, just as issues with DCBC, Sunnydale and others dragged on too. What is clear to me is that this new joint administration takes seriously the management of public finances and of schools, and is fully supportive of our officers in ensuring we protect the public purse and ensure the best possible education for our young people. Failure by Labour has cost the public several £1 million. We are required to fix this problem in the only way realistically and legally we can, which is to clear this school's debt and allow transfer to an academy trust so that it can be sustainable going forwards. I feel that the extensive cabinet and portfolio oversight we now have and our determination to act means that we, unlike Labour, will never again allow one of our schools to end up millions of pounds in debt. It is also an example to everyone in this county as to why we cannot allow Labour to take over and run our county ever again. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Is there anyone else wishes to speak? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. So moving back to the agenda, item 4, forecast of revenue and capital outturn 2022-23, period from the 31st of December. Period to the 31st of December 2022, an update on progress towards achieving MTFP 12 savings. Can I ask Paul Darby, the Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you and good morning, members. This is the third and final in-year budgetary control report presented for 22-23, and including the report are details of the updated forecasts in terms of our reserves and balances that we held at the 31st of March this year. The Q3 report once again flags the continuing impact of COVID-19 on our leisure income and on our waste tonnages. In overall terms, before we adjust for sums that will be picked up from the £10 million earmarked reserve we set aside to fund inflationary pressures, but after we apply our contingency budget, service groupings are forecast to overspend by around £24.4 million, which is broadly in line with the Q2 forecasts. Once we exclude the £11.2 million of unavoidable inflationary pressures linked to energy, fuel, waste and transport, the service group and net overspend reduces to £13.259 million, around £374,000 higher than the forecast position at Q2. Except for adults and health services and resources, all other service groupings are reporting a net overspend in year at Q3. The most significant overspend relates to children and young people services, where our looked after children costs and home to school transport costs are resulting in a forecast overspend of £13.8 million, around £1 million higher than the position forecast at Q2. Details of the cash limit forecasts for each service grouping are set out in paragraphs 58 to 88 of the report, and at section 53 and 54 we set out details of a further £1.5 million of costs that we've treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded from our contingency budget, building on the sums we factored into Q1 and Q2. The forecast cash limit and general reserves position is set out at paragraph 55 in the report, where the cash limit reserves at the 31st of March are forecast to be around £8 million, and the general reserve is forecast to be £20.6 million. The forecasts are marginally lower than the position forecast at Q2, and the general reserve balance is below the minimum value we set out in the reserves policy at County Council last year. This will necessitate a transfer from earmarked reserves to the general reserve at the year end to ensure that we go into 23-24 with a general reserve position of at least £26 million. Corporate costs are still forecast to be around £100,000 under budget, and we're reporting a £5.1 million underspend in the central capital financing budgets and a £6.2 million overachievement of investment income from the investment of our surplus cash balances, which now include the capital received from the sale of the Sands building. Appendix 4 contains details of all earmarked reserves and balances. These are split between sums held corporately, grants and sums held on behalf of third parties, and sums held by services for specific purposes. Excluding schools balances, our earmarked reserves, including the cash limit reserves, are forecast to reduce by around £48 million in year to £187.6 million at the 31st of March 23. Paragraphs 95 to 103 of the report provides a summary of this position, and the forecasts include the implementation of the transfers agreed as part of the reserves review implemented in year as we developed MTFP 13, ensure a circa £3 million reduction on the position previously reported at quarter 3. The dedicated schools grant position is covered at sections 104 to 117 in the report, which provides details of the forecast outturn position against the dedicated schools grant, including high needs SEND allocations, our schools block and our early years block. The updated forecast for our maintained schools show an improved position when compared to quarter 2. However, our maintained schools are still forecasting to have to draw on around £7.8 million of their retained balances this year, which is £500,000 higher than was anticipated in the original budget, but a significant improvement on the £5.3 million additional draw that was forecast at quarter 2. The updated forecast for our high needs DSG shows a forecast £798,000 overspend in year, which compares to the £250,000 overspend forecast at quarter 2 and is in stark contrast to the quarter 1 forecast when an underspend was initially forecast. The early years DSG is forecast to be on budget. The report includes details of the forecast capital programme outturn from paragraph 118 onwards, including details of the revisions to the capital programme to reflect reprofiling and slippage into future years, as well as the receipt of additional grant and other adjustments. During the quarter 3, the capital receipts from the sale of the Sands building and the capital budgets linked to the alternative accommodation strategy have been factored into the capital programme. Members will see that total capital expenditure of £165 million is currently forecast to be incurred this year, about £63 million less than was previously forecast at quarter 2, and £103 million less than the original budget. At the 31st of December, the Council had actually incurred £103 million of capital expenditure in the year to date. Details of how the capital programme will be financed are set out at paragraph 123, and in paragraphs 121 and 122 there's a summary of the summary details of the adjustments to the capital programme and which are proposed for Cabinet endorsement as part of agreeing the recommendations to this report. Members will see at paragraphs 125 to 131 details of performance against the various potential indicators agreed by Council when the 22-23 budget was set last year. In terms of the collection funds, the report includes details of the forecast outturn for both the council tax and the business rates collection funds, and they're set out from paragraph 132 onwards. The outturn forecasts for these collection funds are complex and difficult to explain due to the accounting treatment of government support towards the 2021 financial year end during the COVID pandemic. The net position across both collection funds after receipt of Section 31 grant is included at paragraph 153 and shows a net surplus of £355,000 to the year end, which compares to a £666,000 net surplus forecast at quarter 2. Finally, Chair, at paragraph 158 onwards, there's a brief summary of the progress achieved towards the delivery of the £2.4 million of savings factored into the 22-23 budget, and it shows that 81% of the savings had been achieved by the 31st of December, and there's also an update in that section around HR implications from voluntary, compulsory and early retirements in year and since 2011. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 31. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to speak to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the officers for this comprehensive and thorough report, and budget managers right across the Council for their continued focus on managing their areas. Our experienced and strong finance team is something that's consistently recognised by our external auditors, and maintaining a strong grip in our budgets, particularly at these times when there's significant volatility in demand, turbulence in the markets and general financial uncertainty. Maintaining strong grip is essential. As was said at the budget debate, the unavoidable cost pressures we've experienced this year are unprecedented. Inflation and interest rate increases impacting on pay rises and the price of everything we buy, together with increased demand for children's social care and in home-to-school transport in particular, are resulting in significant overspends. Apart from adult and health services and resources, all other services are forecast to overspend against their cash limit budgets this year, despite any ongoing COVID-related pressures and inflationary pressures linked to pay and price inflation being treated as outside the cash limit. There is a forecast 13.8 million overspend in children and young people's services, mainly due to overspends in looked after children's budgets and overspends on home-to-school transport. The net cash limit overspend for all services is now forecast to be nearly £13.3 million this year, and these costs have to be accommodated in the 23-24 budgets in order to be able to set a balanced budget for next year. The report identifies that around 11 million of COVID and inflationary pressures have been treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded from a combination of corporate contingencies and the earmarked reserve we set aside as part of closing the accounts in anticipation of this position. This is slightly less than what was forecast Q1, largely due to the revised forecasts in terms of our energy budget's overspend this year, and on the back of the energy price cap that has been in place since October and which runs to 31st of March this year, or possibly longer, depending on what's said in a couple of hours. The £10 million earmarked reserve that was set aside to meet these inflationary pressures will be fully utilised and will help offset the impact on the general reserve this year. The cash limit overspend in children and young people's services will need to be met corporately from the general reserve, but thankfully there are some corporate underspends that can mostly cover off this position with additional investment income and savings on capital financing costs through delaying borrowing, and on the general contingencies budget can offset some of the overspends. The updated forecasts show we will need to draw on our general reserve in year by 5.3 million, slightly more than the 4.6 million forecast at Q2, meaning that the general reserve is forecast to be below the minimum threshold set out in our reserve strategy agreed by Council. The estimated balance on the general reserve at year-end is forecast to be 20.6 million, around 680,000 worse than the position forecast at Q2. Should these forecasts be accurate, then we will need to transfer 5.4 million from the medium-term financial plan support reserve to the general reserve at year-end to ensure we go into next year with a general reserve balance of 26 million, which is the minimum we need to stay in line with policy. Overall, excluding schools' balances, based on these forecasts, our earmarked reserves are now forecast to fall by just under 49 million this year, around 4 million more than was forecast at Q2. The forecast cash limit, general reserves and earmarked reserves position for the Council, although forecast to reduce to the year-end, still demonstrates strong financial resilience. If I may comment on the size of reserves held by the Council, I would say that we are a huge organisation, the 7th biggest unitary council in the country, with an annual gross expenditure of 1.7 billion. And our total reserves, excluding schools, are proportionate to our size and represent only around 10% of our annual expenditure. I'd also highlight that we hold nearly £31 million of the £188 million of earmarked reserves on behalf of others, and that £10 million of the MTFP support reserve is being drawn on next year to balance the budget. So reserves are clearly falling. In terms of the collection fund forecasts, the updated position shows an in-year deficit for both the council tax collection fund and the business rates collection fund, which is a slight deterioration on the previous forecast. In overall terms, once the position for previous years and the Section 31 grant we will receive for the various business rate reliefs that we have administered in year are taken into account, there is around a 355,000 net surplus forecast, which is around half the level previously forecast at Q2. The amended capital programme, taking into account further reprofiling and new grants and contributions secured since we considered the Q2 report, including the sale of the Sands HQ building, results in a 22-23 capital programme of around £165 million this year. £63 million less than the £228 million that was anticipated at Q2. I support the amendments made to the capital budget and as outlined in the papers, and would draw members' attention to the tables which sets out the performance against the various prudential indicators agreed by the Council in February last year. As for our dedicated schools grant position, like the Council, our maintained schools are facing unavoidable inflationary pressures that outstrip the budget assumptions and DSG provision. In terms of the delivery of MTFP savings this year, at 31st of December, we had delivered around 81% of the 2.4 million of savings requirements for the year. In summary, Chair, the forecasts include the impact of a range of demographic and inflationary-driven budget pressures outside of our control, which have placed huge pressures on the Council's budgets. Many of these pressures will have a continuing impact into the next financial year and have therefore had to be accommodated in the 23-24 budgets. It is because of our strong financial resilience that we have been able to meet some of these pressures from our reserves this year, and that following the review of reserves we initiated during Q3, we have the capacity to be able to meet budget shortfalls in the short term. But as I have said several times now, you can only spend reserves once, and that is not a sustainable position in the longer term. With that, Chair, I move the recommendations set out in the report at paragraphs 31A to K. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Bell, to Paul and his team for this detailed report, and to all the budget managers across the Council for their continued effective management of their budgets in what are difficult circumstances. Managing our budgets is difficult at the best of times due to the scale and complexity of the Council, but this has been particularly challenging this year as the Council has faced significant demand and volatility in our cost base. As mentioned by Councillor Bell at Q3, £11 million of inflationary and COVID legacy pressures have been forecast as needing to be treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, slightly less than what was forecast at Q2. These costs will need to be funded from a combination of corporate contingencies and the earmarked reserve we set aside as part of closing the accounts in anticipation of this position. The inflationary and demand pressures that are identified in this report have been factored into the 2023-24 budget we agreed at Council last month. We will need to continue to keep a close eye on our looked after children and home to school transport budgets, but also our leisure centre income across the coming year, and ensure that our adult social care fees increased next year are in line with our budget provision. Of course, many of the inflationary pressures we face are also faced by our schools, both maintained and academies. The Q3 update forecasts in this report show a significant improvement in the forecast overspend across our maintained schools, the result of action taken by our schools to manage the position in year. The challenges all schools face, from a combination of the Teachers' Pay Award and increased energy and other operating costs, has meant that our maintained schools had to draw on £7.3 million of their retained reserves to balance their budgets this year, with the Q3 forecasts indicating that the outturn will be circa £7.8 million draw on those reserves, £500,000 higher than what was assumed at the budget setting. With that, I am happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report at paragraph 31, as outlined in the report, including the amendments to the capital programme, which would see the Council deliver, as has already been said, an unprecedented £165 million of capital expenditure this year. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this paper, please? No? Can we agree in the report and its recommendations? Okay, I can confirm the recommendations are agreed. Move on to item 5, which is the annual review of the Constitution. Can I ask James Etherington, the Legal Manager and Deputy Monitoring Officer, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm pleased to present proposals following the annual review of the Constitution. The review has been conducted with input from colleagues and members across the Council, as in previous years. A summary of all of the proposed changes are attached at Appendix 27 to the report. The most significant changes relate to the format, appearance and arrangements of the sections. It is proposed that relevant functions will appear together rather than in alphabetical order, which should make the Constitution easier to navigate. The Officer Scheme of Delegation has been reviewed and amendments are proposed to reflect minor and/or technical changes in legislation, structural changes within the council and to ensure that the scheme accurately reflects the day-to-day operational activity within the council. The Chief Executive's delegations have been added to and now include reference to the recent statutory guidance on special severance payments, as well as the delegations relevant to policy, performance and communications, which fall to the recently created Head of Corporate Affairs post. It is proposed that the Director of Public Health has their own separate scheme, which includes their statutory responsibilities to report to the Chief Executive, rather than as previously presented within the Corporate Director of Adults and Health. This represents a realignment of responsibilities rather than any delegation of additional responsibilities. There are a number of changes set out at paragraph 54 onwards in the report in relation to the Corporate Director of Resources. Again, these are to reflect structural changes within the Directorate, legislative changes, and to amend wording to more accurately reflect the scope of work done by the Directorate. The proposed amendments to the scheme of delegation are appended to the report at appendices 15 to 21 of the report. Cabinet is required to approve the delegation of executive powers. When this report was initially published with the agenda, a recommendation in this regard was missing. Once the error was identified, a revised report was published, and the relevant recommendation is now in the updated report at paragraph 4b. The report also includes proposals to amend the Council procedure rules to provide clarity and remove some inconsistencies, and there are minor changes proposed to the Finance and Contract procedure rules. These proposals are contained at Appendix 22 to 24. Cabinet will also note that Council will be asked to agree a minor amendment to the Employee Code of Values and Behaviours to allow token gifts such as flowers or a box of chocolates to be accepted where to refuse would cause offence or potentially impact on working relationships with service users. The recommendations are at paragraph 4, and just to clarify, Cabinet is asked to consider the proposed amendments to the Council's constitution, approve the delegation of executive powers as set out in the proposed amendments to the Officer's Scheme of Delegation, and to recommend to Council to agree the proposed revisions to the Constitution at its meeting on the 24th of May.
Thanks, James. The Council's Constitution sets out how the Council operates, how decisions are made, and the procedures which are followed to ensure that these are efficient, transparent and accountable to local people. Some of these processes are required by law, while others are a matter for the Council to choose. It is therefore good practice to ensure the Constitution is regularly reviewed to ensure that it remains fit for purpose and reflects good practice and legislation. The report summarises the work that has been done throughout the year in reviewing all aspects of the Constitution. This year's review has included a fundamental review of the structure, format and appearance of the Constitution, as well as a review of its content. The majority of changes relate to that and will mean that the Constitution is much more accessible and user-friendly. The proposed changes to the Officer's Scheme of Delegation in respect of executive functions are intended to update the scheme in light of structural changes within directorates, changes in legislation, and ensure that the scheme more accurately reflects the day-to-day operational activity of the Council. The changes are proportionate and essential to ensuring that Council business can be conducted efficiently and effectively. As in previous years, the Council's cross-party Constitution Working Group have been consulted on the proposed changes, particularly in relation to the Council procedure rules and the Code of Practice for members and officers dealing with planning matters. I am pleased to move the recommendations at paragraph 4 in the report that Cabinet approves the delegation of executive powers and the proposed amendments to the Officer Scheme of Delegation as set out in the report, and recommend that Council agree to the proposed revisions to the Constitution at its meeting on the 24th of May 2023. Can I please invite Councillor Alan Shield, Cabinet Portfolio for Equality and Inclusion, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. I echo those comments in relation to the importance of the Constitution and the need to keep it under review. The Constitution is a living document and provides the foundation and basis for effective and efficient structural control of this local authority organisation. I'd like to thank the officers involved in the ongoing review and the updating of this document, and as a member of the Constitutional Working Group involved in this process, confirm that the review is an essential control element to ensure that it continues to remain fit for purpose. I duly second the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Alan. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the report, please? Yeah, Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. The Deputy Monitoring Officer has outlined the various changes in the Constitution. I welcome the proposed reformatting of it, which will make it easy to navigate and for people to understand how Council decisions are made. And I note that the delegations to Chief Officers have also been updated both for clarity and for quantum as appropriate for the working of the Council. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. As we've already taken item 6 at the beginning, we'll move on to item 7, which is County Durham Partnership Update, report of the Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change. So if I can invite Alan Patrickson, the Corporate Director, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the regular roundup of activities from the County Durham Partnership and sets out information on the work of the partnership boards and of AAPs across the county. The County Durham Partnership Board held its annual event in November, which this year focused on the cost of living crisis and was organised jointly with Advice in County Durham. The event was incredibly well supported, with a large number of partners from the voluntary and community sector and other agencies in attendance, seeking positive solutions to some current difficult issues. The Board has also received updates from the thematic leads for economic partnership, focusing on the development of the county's inclusive economic strategy, along with the investment plan for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. At the November meeting, partners shared their plans for dealing with the current and future financial pressures facing the sector to enable joint understanding of savings plans and the possible impacts across the partnership in future financial planning periods. The January Partnership Board focused on North East devolution, the implications for the region and the upcoming consultation, which is now live, along with an update on the Hordern Together project, where agencies are working together on a place-based pilot scheme along with central government departments. The aim is to improve coordination between central government departments and local teams and places, empowering local communities to develop and deliver solutions to issues that matter most to them. The report highlights progress on the Council's review of community engagement, which is currently subject to public and partner consultation. The consultation seeks views on the recommendations of an independent report commissioned by the Council on the governance and mechanisms of community engagement currently in place across the county, focusing on improvement and representation. The report also notes the successful progress of the Warm Spaces Network, where council and community venues are working together to provide safe and warm spaces over the winter for those who may be finding it difficult to cope with the increasing costs of home heating. The Fun with Food programme continues to deliver on its objectives of providing an enriching activity for young people with food, tackling food poverty and holiday hunger. Central government funding for this project has been supplemented by £425,000 allocated by the Council's Poverty Action Steering Group. The Safeguarding, Community Safety and other statutory partnership boards continue to deliver on their important agendas of providing assurance, support and challenge to maintain and increase standards of partnership working, governance and reporting across a range of statutory issues. Many of these are set out in this report. The Environment and Climate Change Partnership have hosted the County Durham Environment Awards in person for the first time since before the COVID pandemic. The event, which is now in its 33rd year, proved as ever to be an inspirational and celebratory evening, highlighting community groups, individuals, businesses and other organisations that are demonstrating innovative environmental guardianship and community spirit. The remainder of the report outlines the work of the thematic partnerships and AAPs in support of the County Durham vision. In each of these areas, the report highlights work being done at a county level, along with some shining examples of the extensive local level delivery work facilitated through our area action partnerships, demonstrating the thriving local partnership work across the county. Chair, the recommendation is in paragraph 11 is to note the report.
Thanks, Alan. This report regularly brings together in one place some inspiring examples of partnership working across the county. As Chair of the County Durham Partnership, I'm always pleased to see how the work of the partnership extends across the length and breadth of County Durham, bringing together agencies and communities for the benefit of our local areas. The partnership has touched on a wide variety of issues in this reporting period. The ongoing cost of living crisis remains a concern for all of our residents and businesses, and our partnership event in November focused on this difficult issue. The attendance of over 120 people representing community and voluntary organisations, as well as officers from many public agencies, is testimony to the serious concern over the issue and also the willingness to make a positive action to help. The once-in-a-lifetime opportunity presented by North East Devolution is a milestone for the region, unlocking some £4.2 billion of investment over 30 years and seeing additional powers transferred from Whitehall to local people and partnerships with better knowledge and experience of our communities. The deal is expected to create 24,000 extra jobs, increase skills development and lever in some £5 billion of private sector investment. The deal is currently subject to consultation and has formed an important part of recent partnership conversations. Also currently subject to consultation is a review of community engagement, which the Council has commissioned, and which has recently concluded after several months of intensive work with partnership representatives and stakeholders. It is important that we ensure that our mechanisms, governance and funding remain up to date and effective to support communities across the county, and this review is designed to ensure that we can focus our resources and efforts where they have the most positive impact. The Partnership Board continues to receive updates from the Poverty Action Steering Group, demonstrating the power of partnership working across the poverty agenda and also the importance of this issue for our partnership agenda. The Fun with Food programme continues to provide help to those children at risk of holiday hunger and has continued to deliver projects at both council and community venues. And as has already been said by the officer, this has been topped up by council funding. The previous partnership report that came into Cabinet noted the launch of the Council's Warm Spaces Network, bringing together council and community venues that are able to provide places for people who are worried about energy costs to stay warm, socialise and get access to services and refreshments. The initiative is a true partnership effort with funding provided by the Council being used to deliver a wider benefit than any individual partnership member could deliver alone. We can see in this update that there are now 175 premises registered as warm spaces, once again demonstrating the scale of partnership support across the county for the most vulnerable in our communities. Our partnership boards continue to deal effectively with a range of strategic and statutory issues affecting the county, working together to deliver the aims of our County Durham Vision 2035 of more and better jobs, people living long and independent lives and connected communities. The report also provides highlights from the work of our AAPs across the county, providing valuable initiatives at a local level, adding value to communities and delivering positive outcomes. Highlights in this report range from an initiative to educate young people on the dangers of cybercrime to projects tackling isolation and loneliness in older people. These are alongside many others supporting employment, education, environment and community support. Finally, I'd like to once again mention and applaud the work that our partnerships continue to play in vital humanitarian support work. February saw the one-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces, giving us all pause to reflect on the safety and security we enjoy in our county and our country. Our partnerships, communities and residents continue to play an important role in providing a welcome place of safety for those fleeing conflict around the world. This report is full of important and inspiring projects, large and small, and as always I would recommend that everyone should read to see the extent of the excellent work taking place across our county. I believe Councillor Scott would like to speak to the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would echo your comments. The continuing impressive extent of partnership working across our county, spearheaded by the County Durham Partnership and delivered within our communities by an inspiring mix of volunteers, community groups and agency professionals working together with common goals. I just want to highlight two areas from today's report. The first is our review of community engagement, which has made excellent progress since the last update. Our independent consultant has reported back to the steering group, chaired by the corporate director, and we're now pleased to be able to put the proposals that came out of that work in front of our partners and residents through the consultation process. This approach we are following here comes out of our revised commitment to viewing our consultation processes as conversations, putting forward proposals, listening to a range of views, and working together to deliver positive change. Today's report highlights the value of good partnership working and good community engagement, and our review seeks to strengthen this by ensuring that we are fit for purpose for 2023 and for the future. Like all good conversations, we'll be listening carefully to hear what is being said before bringing a final report here into Cabinet later this year. The second issue I'd like to highlight is the volume and the range of opportunities coming through that will help both the economy and the environment of County Durham. North East Devolution rightly grabs the headlines, but alongside this, the opportunities through the Local Investment Plan, a central feature of the work around the UK Prosperity Fund, along with additional significant funding for electric vehicle infrastructure and other renewable energy projects, should be highlighted and celebrated. These important opportunities will help place us in the best position possible to develop a positive outlook for the county. Chair, this report is a thorough and fascinating read, and I echo your remarks that it should be read and communicated widely. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay, can I ask Cabinet to note the report?
Agreed.
Good. Okay. Item 8 is any other business. I haven't been notified of any other business, so I'd like to thank everyone for taking part and to those members of the public and media who have watched the meeting online. That concludes the business for this meeting.